I spent my last $12,000 to fly my family across the country for my medical school graduation. The night before the ceremony, they texted me that they chose a last-minute cruise instead. My aunt said they'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating. I walked the stage alone, but what I did next made sure they never forgot the empty seats. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, we bring you the most emotional, shocking, and unforgettable stories from Reddit and beyond. Today's story is about a medical student who sacrificed everything to achieve his dream, only to have his family trample on it with cruel words and empty seats. But his response? It's one you won't forget. If you believe in karma and the power of self-respect, hit that like button, subscribe so you never miss a story, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. This one cuts deep. Let's begin. I was 29 years old when I finally walked across that stage. 29, with graying temples and tired eyes and a heart full of a hope I'd been carrying for over a decade. Medical school had taken everything from me, my savings, my social life, my youth. It had taken years of sleepless nights, endless exams, and the constant pressure of knowing that one mistake could cost someone their life someday. But I'd made it. I'd actually made it. The day I got my acceptance letter, 7 years earlier, I was working a double shift at a restaurant, pouring coffee for people who barely looked at me. I checked my email on my phone during a rare lull, and there it was. The subject line read simply, "Congratulations." I opened it with trembling fingers and read the words that would change everything. I had been accepted to medical school. I locked myself in the walk-in cooler and cried. I cried because I'd done it. I cried because my father had told me I never would. I cried because my mother had smiled and said, "That's nice, honey," before changing the subject to her upcoming trip to Vegas. I came from a family that didn't believe in dreams. My parents were practical people, working class, struggling, surviving. They'd raised me and my 2 siblings to do the same. Get a job, any job. Pay your bills. Don't aim too high, because you'll only be disappointed. When I told them I wanted to be a doctor, my father laughed. He actually laughed out loud. "Doctors are for rich kids," he said. "Kids whose parents can pay for tutors and prep courses and applications. You're not that kid. You're never going to be that kid." But I was determined. I worked my way through community college, taking classes in the mornings and working nights at a warehouse. I transferred to State University, where I lived on ramen and energy drinks and studied until my eyes burned. I scraped together enough for the MCAT and application fees, taking on extra shifts, selling things I didn't need, living on less than nothing. When the acceptance letter finally came, it felt like proof. Proof that I could do it. Proof that my father was wrong. The medical school was across the country, 3,000 miles from everything I'd ever known. It offered me a small scholarship and the promise of loans for the rest. I packed my bags and left, and my family waved goodbye from the driveway like they were seeing me off to war. Which, in a way, they were. The next 7 years were a blur of sacrifice. I lived in cramped apartments with roommates who came and went. I ate ramen and peanut butter sandwiches. I studied until my eyes burned, then studied more. I worked nights and weekends when I could, picking up shifts at hospitals, clinics, anywhere that would pay me something. I took out loans that would take decades to repay. I missed weddings, funerals, birthdays. I missed everything. And through it all, my family was absent. Not hostile, exactly, but distant. They didn't visit. They rarely called. When I did call them, the conversations were short, awkward, filled with long pauses and empty words. My father would ask how school was going, and I'd tell him, and he'd grunt and change the subject. My mother would talk about her friends, her bingo games, her complaints about the neighbors. My brother and sister, both still living in our hometown, had their own lives, their own struggles. I was a ghost to them, a memory, someone who'd left and never really come back. I told myself it didn't matter. I was doing this for me, not for them. I was building a future, my future. They didn't need to understand. They didn't need to be part of it. But I was lying. Of course I wanted them to be part of it. I wanted them to see me, to finally see me, as someone who'd achieved something. I wanted them to be proud. So when graduation finally came, I made a decision. I would bring them all to the ceremony. I would fly them out, put them up in a nice hotel, show them what I'd become. It would be my gift to them, and to myself. A chance to finally bridge the gap, to make them understand. I started planning 6 months in advance. I researched flights, hotels, restaurants. I priced everything out, calculated and recalculated. The total kept coming back to the same number, $12,000. $12,000 I didn't have. But I had credit cards. I had loan money I could redirect. I had a signing bonus from the residency program I'd matched with, money that was supposed to go toward moving expenses and a security deposit on a new apartment. I told myself it was worth it. This was a once-in-a-lifetime moment. You only graduate from medical school once. You only get one chance to have your family there. So I charged it. $12,000 on credit cards with interest rates that made my stomach turn. I booked the flights, the hotel, a private dinner for the night before the ceremony. I bought my mother a corsage and my father a tie. I ordered VIP seats for them, right in the front row, where they'd have the best view of the stage. Then I called them with the news. My mother's reaction was muted. "Oh, that's nice, honey. Let me check with your father." My father was more direct. $12,000? Are you insane? You could have sent us the money instead. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. But they agreed to come. All of them. My parents, my brother and his wife, my sister and her boyfriend, and my aunt, my mother's sister, who'd always been closer to me than my own parents. Aunt Linda was the one who'd sent me care packages in medical school, who'd called me on holidays, who'd told me she was proud of me when no one else did. Having her there meant everything. The weeks leading up to graduation were a whirlwind of finals, ceremonies, and last-minute preparations. I barely slept. I barely ate. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I thought about that moment. Walking across the stage, looking out at the crowd, seeing my family in those VIP seats. It kept me going. The day before graduation, I got a text from my mother. "Change of plans. We're not coming." I stared at the screen, my heart stopping. I called immediately. No answer. I called again. Nothing. I texted my brother. "What's going on?" He replied a few minutes later. "Mom and Dad booked a last-minute cruise. They said they needed a vacation. Aunt Linda's going too." "Sorry, man. A cruise." They'd chosen a cruise over my graduation. I called Aunt Linda, hoping she'd at least explain. She answered on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry about the graduation. But you understand, right? It's been such a long winter, and we all needed a break. The cruise was such a good deal. We'll celebrate when we get back, I promise." "When you get back?" I repeated. "I start my residency next week. I won't be here when you get back." "Oh, well, we'll figure something out. Don't be upset. It's just a ceremony. Just a ceremony. 7 years of my life, reduced to just a ceremony." Before I could respond, another text came through. This one was from my mother, and it was longer. "Crueler. Watching you pretend to be a doctor sounds painful. We'd rather be on a cruise. Don't be dramatic. It's just a piece of paper." I read it 3 times, each word cutting deeper than the last. Pretend to be a doctor. After everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd endured, she still saw me as pretending. Still saw me as the kid who was aiming too high, the one who'd never make it. Then Aunt Linda texted separately. "We'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating. No hard feelings, right? Somewhere worth celebrating." My graduation wasn't worth celebrating. I wasn't worth celebrating. I sat on my apartment floor for a long time, staring at the wall. The flights I'd booked. The hotel rooms. The VIP seats. $12,000, gone. $12,000 I'd never see again. $12,000 that could have paid off a chunk of my loans. That could have been a down payment on a car. That could have been anything but this. I thought about calling them back, screaming at them, begging them to change their minds. But what was the point? They'd made their choice. They'd made it clear where I stood in their priorities. I was an afterthought, a burden, a joke. The next morning, I woke up and went to graduation. Alone. I put on my gown and my hood, the colors representing years of work and sacrifice. I walked with my class to the auditorium, surrounded by people whose families had flown in from all over the country. I heard them talking about their parents, their siblings, their grandparents, all here to see them walk. I smiled and nodded and pretended I was fine. When we filed into the auditorium, I looked up at the VIP section. My seats were empty. 7 empty chairs in the front row, visible to everyone. I watched other graduates point to their families in the crowd, waving, blowing kisses. I sat in my seat and stared straight ahead. The dean called my name. I walked across the stage, shook hands, accepted my diploma. I looked out at the crowd one last time. 7 empty chairs. I smiled for the camera, then walked back to my seat. After the ceremony, I took photos with friends and their families. I posed with people I barely knew, pretending to be part of their celebrations. Then I went back to my apartment, changed out of my gown, and sat in the dark. The cruise ship had probably left port by now. They were probably drinking cocktails and watching the sunset, not thinking about me at all. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photos I'd taken that morning. A shot of the empty VIP seats, clearly visible, clearly vacant. A shot of my diploma, fresh and official. A shot of me in my gown, standing alone. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I wasn't going to let this go. The next morning, I went to a print shop. I made copies of my diploma, high quality, on nice paper. I printed the photo of the empty seats, blown up to 8 by 10. I bought frames for each of them, simple, elegant frames that would look good on a wall. Then I went to the post office. I addressed a package to my parents' house. Inside, I put a framed copy of my diploma, a framed photo of the empty seats, and a note. The note read, "Since you couldn't be there to see it in person, I thought you'd want a reminder of what you missed. The seats were reserved for you. They stayed empty. I hope the cruise was worth it." I mailed it. Then I went home and waited. 3 hours later, my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. She called again, and again, and again. Finally, I listened to the voicemail. She was sobbing, actually sobbing, her voice cracking and breaking in a way I'd never heard before. Please call me back. We didn't know. We didn't understand. Linda showed us the photos. The seats were really empty. They were really reserved for us. We thought you were exaggerating. We thought you'd understand. Please call me back. I deleted the voicemail. Then I did something they didn't expect. I had been planning something for months, something I hadn't told anyone about. When I matched with my residency program, I also applied for a position in a rural clinic overseas, a place that desperately needed doctors, a place where I could make a real difference. It was a 2-year commitment, starting immediately after graduation. I'd been hesitant to accept it, worried about being so far from family, worried about missing more milestones, more connections. But now, the decision was clear. I accepted the position. Within a week, I had sold most of my belongings, sublet my apartment, and booked a one-way ticket to a country I'd never visited. I told no one. Not my parents, not my siblings, not Aunt Linda. I simply disappeared. The clinic was in a remote village, hours from the nearest city. There was no reliable internet, no cell service, no way for anyone to reach me. I worked 12-hour days, treating patients who had never seen a doctor before. I delivered babies, set broken bones, diagnosed diseases I'd only read about in textbooks. I was exhausted every single day, but I was also fulfilled. For the first time in my life, I felt like I mattered. Months passed. I thought about my family less and less. The pain faded, replaced by a quiet acceptance. They were who they were. I couldn't change them. I could only change how I responded to them. Then, about a year into my time overseas, I got a message. It came through a satellite phone at the clinic, relayed from someone who'd tracked me down through my residency program. It was my brother. "Please call. Mom's sick. Really sick. She wants to see you." I stared at the message for a long time. Then I folded it up and put it in my pocket. I didn't call. Not because I was cruel. Not because I didn't care. But because I didn't know what to say. What could I possibly say to the woman who'd called my greatest achievement pretending? What could I say to the family who'd chosen a cruise over my graduation? I threw myself back into work. The clinic was busier than ever. An outbreak of malaria, a complicated pregnancy, a child with a preventable infection that would haunt me for years. There was no time for reflection, no time for regret. But at night, alone in my small room, I thought about my mother. I thought about her sobbing voicemail. I thought about the empty seats. I thought about the $12,000 I'd never see again. And I wondered if I'd made the right choice. Another 6 months passed. I finished my commitment at the clinic and returned to the United States. I had a new job lined up, a residency at a major hospital in a different city. I was starting over again. Before I reported for duty, I decided to go home. Not to my family. I didn't even know if I still had a family. But to my hometown, to see the places I'd grown up, to confront the ghosts I'd left behind. I drove through the old neighborhood, past the house where I'd lived, past the schools I'd attended, past the restaurant where I'd worked those double shifts. Everything looked smaller than I remembered, shabbier, less significant. Finally, I parked outside my parents' house. It hadn't changed. The same paint, the same lawn, the same curtains in the windows. I sat in the car for a long time, trying to decide what to do. The front door opened. My father stepped out. He looked older, much older. His hair had gone completely gray, and he walked with a slight stoop, as if the weight of the years had finally caught up with him. He looked at my car, squinting, trying to see who was inside. I got out. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then he said, "You came back." "I came back," I agreed. He nodded slowly. "Your mother's inside. She's not doing well." I followed him into the house. It smelled the same, like coffee and old furniture and the faint scent of my mother's perfume. She was in the living room, sitting in her favorite chair, a blanket over her lap. She looked frail, diminished, her face pale and drawn. When she saw me, she started to cry. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I sat down across from her. I didn't speak. I just waited. "We didn't know," she said. "We didn't understand what it meant to you. We thought it was just a ceremony, just a piece of paper. We didn't know about the seats. We didn't know you'd reserve them." Linda said. She stopped, her voice breaking. Linda said she was just joking. About the cruise, about the celebration. She said you'd understand. She said you always understood. I thought about Aunt Linda, her care packages, her phone calls, her words that day. We'd rather be somewhere worth celebrating. Had she really been joking? Or had she been cruel? And now she was trying to rewrite history? Where is Linda now? I asked. My mother's face crumpled. She passed away. 6 months ago. Cancer. It was very fast. I felt something then, a strange mixture of shock, sadness, and something else. Relief? Guilt? I didn't know. She wanted to see you, my mother continued. At the end, she asked for you. But we couldn't find you. No one could find you. I thought about the message from my brother, the one I'd ignored. Had that been about Aunt Linda, not my mother? Or had they both been sick at the same time? I'd never know now. "I'm sorry," I said. And I meant it. Not for leaving, not for disappearing, but for the loss. For the pain. For the complicated mess of feelings that came with loving people who didn't always love you back. My mother reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold, brittle. "Can you forgive us?" she asked. "Can you forgive me?" I looked at her. This woman who'd raised me, who'd dismissed me, who'd chosen a cruise over my greatest achievement. I thought about the empty seats. I thought about the $12,000. I thought about the years of silence, the years of being invisible. And I thought about Aunt Linda, dead now, with her care packages and her phone calls and her cruel joke. Or was it a joke? I'd never know. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I want to." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "That's fair. That's more than I deserve." We sat in silence for a long time. Then I asked about my father, about my brother and sister, about the lives they'd lived while I was gone. She told me, small things, ordinary things. Marriages, divorces, births, deaths. A catalog of moments I'd missed. That night, I stayed in my old room. It had been converted into a guest room years ago, all traces of my childhood erased. I lay in the unfamiliar bed and stared at the ceiling, trying to process everything. In the morning, I said goodbye. My mother cried. My father shook my hand, his grip firmer than I expected. I drove away without looking back. I went to the cemetery where Aunt Linda was buried. I found her grave, a simple headstone with her name and dates. I stood there for a long time, trying to feel something. Sadness? Anger? Closure? I felt nothing but the cold wind and the weight of unanswered questions. "Goodbye, Linda," I said finally. "I hope you found somewhere worth celebrating." Then I left. My residency was intense, demanding, all-consuming. I worked 80-hour weeks, slept when I could, ate when I remembered. I made friends, lost touch with them, made new ones. I dated briefly, half-heartedly, never letting anyone get too close. The walls I'd built were high and thick, and I wasn't ready to tear them down. But slowly, over time, they started to crack. A patient thanked me for saving her life. A colleague asked my advice on a difficult case. A child drew me a picture, which I still have, taped to my refrigerator. Small moments, insignificant to anyone else, but to me they were everything. Proof that I mattered. Proof that I wasn't pretending. I started therapy. I talked about my family, about the graduation, about the empty seats. I talked about Aunt Linda and her care packages and her cruel words. I talked about the $12,000 and the voicemail and the years of silence. My therapist listened. She didn't judge. She didn't offer easy answers. She just listened, and that was enough. You did what you had to do, she said one day. You protected yourself. That's not wrong. That's survival. But I abandoned them, I said. I disappeared. I didn't even say goodbye. They abandoned you first, she reminded me. They made their choice. You made yours. The difference is, you're the one carrying the guilt. She was right. I was carrying guilt, heavy and suffocating. Guilt for leaving, guilt for not forgiving, guilt for being angry. I'd spent so long being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who understood, that I'd forgotten how to be the one who was hurt. I started writing letters. Letters to my mother, to my father, to Aunt Linda, even though she was gone. Letters I never sent, never intended to send. I wrote about the empty seats, the $12,000, the years of silence. I wrote about the cruise and the voicemail and the pain I'd carried for so long. And slowly, the guilt started to lift. I called my mother on her birthday. We talked for 20 minutes, safe topics, neutral ground. She asked about my work, my apartment, my life. I answered honestly, but carefully, not sharing too much, not opening myself up to more pain. She didn't mention the graduation. Neither did I. My father and I exchanged emails occasionally. He sent me articles about medical breakthroughs, things he thought I'd find interesting. I responded with short notes, polite but distant. It was more than we'd ever had, and less than I'd once hoped for. My brother and sister reached out separately. We had awkward phone calls, stilted conversations that never quite found their rhythm. Too much time had passed. Too much water under the bridge. But we tried. We all tried. And sometimes, trying was enough. A year later, I got a package in the mail. It was from my mother. Inside was a photo, the VIP seats, empty, the same photo I'd sent her years ago. But now it was framed, and on the back she'd written, I look at this every day, to remind myself of what I missed, to remind myself to be better. I stared at it for a long time. Then I put it on my desk, next to the child's drawing and the photo of my graduating class. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't closure. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A step. I called her that night. Thank you, I said. For the photo. She cried. I didn't. I love you, she said. I know I haven't always shown it. But I love you. I know, I said. And for the first time, I believed it. The next few years were a slow process of rebuilding. I visited home for holidays. Not every holiday, but some. I sat through awkward dinners and stilted conversations. I watched my parents age, watched my brother's kids grow, watched my sister navigate her own complicated life. I never forgot the graduation. I never forgot the empty seats or the $12,000 or the cruel words. Those memories were part of me now, scars that would never fully heal. But I also remembered the patients I'd treated, the lives I'd touched, the difference I'd made. I remembered the child's drawing on my refrigerator and the colleague who'd asked my advice and the gratitude in a stranger's eyes. I was a doctor, not pretending, not faking, a real doctor with a real degree and real skills and a real impact on the world. And that, I realized, was worth celebrating, even if no one else showed up. Today, I'm an attending physician at a major hospital. I teach medical students, mentor young doctors, and treat patients who remind me every day why I chose this path. I have a small apartment, a cat who adopted me, and a life that's quietly, stubbornly mine. My mother passed away 2 years ago. I was with her at the end, holding her hand, just as she'd held mine when I was small. We didn't talk about the graduation. We didn't need to. The photo on her nightstand said everything. My father followed a year later. He and I had made peace, in our own way, not through words, but through presence. I was there when he needed me. That was enough. My brother and I talk regularly now. He sends me photos of his kids, and I send him postcards from conferences I attend. It's not a deep connection, but it's a connection. Sometimes that's enough. My sister found my letters, the ones I never sent, after our mother died. She read them, then called me. I didn't know, she said. I didn't know how much they hurt you. You were a kid, I said. You had your own stuff. That's not an excuse. No, I agreed. But it's an explanation. We talked for hours that night, really talked, for the first time in years. She apologized for things I hadn't even blamed her for. I apologized for disappearing. We cried, we laughed, we remembered. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't a Hallmark movie. It was messy and complicated and imperfect, but it was real. Aunt Linda's grave is still there, In the cemetery I visited years ago. I go sometimes when I'm in town. I stand in front of her headstone and try to feel something. Sometimes I feel sad. Sometimes I feel angry. Sometimes I feel nothing at all. I still don't know if she meant to be cruel or if it was just a joke gone wrong. I'll never know. And maybe that's okay. Maybe some questions don't have answers. The $12,000 is long gone. I paid off the credit cards eventually, with interest that made me wince. But I don't regret spending it. Not anymore. Because that money bought me something more valuable than a family reunion. It bought me clarity. It bought me the truth about who my family was and what I meant to them. And that truth, painful as it was, set me free. Free to build my own life. Free to define my own worth. Free to stop waiting for their approval and start giving it to myself. If you're out there, waiting for someone to show up, waiting for someone to see you, waiting for someone to be proud, stop waiting. Be proud of yourself. Show up for yourself. Celebrate yourself. Because you are worth celebrating. You always have been. I know that now. It took me years and thousands of dollars and a family that let me down to figure it out. But I know it. And if my family could see me now, really see me, that I think they'd be proud too. Not because I'm a doctor, but because I'm finally, completely, unapologetically myself. The empty seats are still empty. But my life isn't. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched you, if it made you feel something, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more real-life tales, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. You never know who might be sitting alone tonight, waiting for someone to show up. Show up for yourself. You're worth it.